Huge number of witches' marks found at Tudor House in astonishing discovery. Oh, you don't say. It's just in time for spooky season. And let's read a little bit. This is pretty wild because this is one I've been sitting on for quite some time. There's something called a small pup. Otherwise, sounds great on Discord. Thank you. Tiny, but it's there. Okay, copy that. Okay, so a staggering array of witches' marks, this is straight from the article, may have been discovered on the walls of a Tudor property in England. The carvings, which are formerly known as apotropaic marks, I think is how you say that, were at the time believed to provide ritual protection against evil. News of the discovery, aptly timed to coincide with Halloween, spooky, was released by English Heritage, a charity that looks after hundreds of historic monuments, buildings, and sites. Gainsborough Old Hall is a manor house in the eastern county of Lincolnshire that was once visited by Henry VIII and his then Queen Catherine Howard, according to an English Heritage press released Tuesday. That's today. The markings were discovered by Rick Berry, an English Heritage volunteer who spent 2 years mapping around 20 carvings inside the grand building, according to the release. Now, this is pretty cool. Listen to this. These include a staggering array of designs, according to English Heritage, though there's a notable concentration in the servants' wing of the hall. Among the marks were simple circles that ordinarily would have been expected to have a 6-petal design inside, known as a hexafoil, to trap demons. We just got, it just went deep really fast. One theory is that the petals may have faded away or that drawing them would have been beyond the skills of the carver, an English Heritage spokesperson said. Okay, so also found in the overlapping V's, known as Marian marks, as they're believed by some to be a call for protection from the Virgin Mary, and a pentacle, which was used to protect against evil. Now, the cool part is, I don't know if these are this is stock footage or the actual carvings. I'll leave this up behind me for a minute. Links are in the description down below, of course, if you guys want to check that stuff out, because there's a ton of information here as usual, and it's impossible to get to all of it. But as usual, we are taking your calls. If you want to be part of the show tonight, 702-957-1037. You can click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. Now, the thing that I was thinking about regarding this, now this has been something that's on my mind recently, if you guys have been listening to the podcast feed. It's not just let's say thresholds as natural thresholds. We talk about that stuff quite often. Rivers, shout out our friend Rivers out there. Sleepy Hollow, right? The Headless Horseman has a problem with this flowing water, this sort of sacred source water. And he ends up stopping, and the whole tale, how it kind of unfolds. But in the Ichabod Crane version, he gets the pumpkin thrown at him, which, God, that pop is killing me. I wonder what that is. It's too late now in the game to fix it. Okay. But it got me thinking about that. So not just these, let's say, natural thresholds, which we've talked about quite often, not just, let's say, flowing water or, different thresholds, liminal spaces between, the swamp and the forest, things like this, right? Where suddenly the ecosystem kind of changes and you get a new feeling of, whatever it is, whatever happened, something changed in the air, something changed with everything, the moisture, every bit about it. And they say that those liminal spaces are where these, the world thins, the old thinning of the veil, as we talk about with Samhain, All Hallows Eve and all the stuff, and the actual space we're in. Yeah, voice meter. No, unfortunately, it's not a voice meter thing. I'm not using that anymore. Okay, but yeah. So the thing is this. Now, I got to thinking about this, and I've had this in my back pocket, this other idea for quite a long time. Not just witches' marks, which, again, kind of cool that came up today, a couple days from Halloween here. But in the Ozarks, they have this thing that's also known as Ozark witchcraft, but the witch pegs. You guys ever heard of this as well? Which is, again, I'll just read this real fast because it's a very short thing. All these links are in the description down below. Witch pegs are in rural areas in the Ozarks, charms for keeping witches away from a home, made from cedar pegs with 3 prongs driven into the ground in the path of the door. Folklore belief holds that the prongs are associated with the Trinity. It is considered bad luck to step on or disturb a witch peg. And we've all seen some of this, some of those scary stories where you go out in the forest and there's these witches' pegs somewhere out there kind of on the ground, thrown around as if they're, I don't know, some kind of a scary thing. I think, weren't they in the Blair Witch? You guys ever saw that, Blair Witch? Weren't there witches' pegs? I don't know. It's been a long time since I saw that movie. But maybe, just maybe. But anyway, so the question I have tonight as we start going and getting into this is we have the natural thresholds, which is obvious. That part is incredibly obvious. Again, the flowing water, which we can talk about as well tonight. But what about the weirdness of this creating these let's say, unnatural threshold, something that we do, think the idea of a circle of salt, or think of hanging a horseshoe. We've talked about this in the past, but in this particular space, not these actual witches' pegs, or this, as it's known, there's a fancy word for this. It's called, as I tried to say it earlier, apotropaic magic. And again, like I said, probably mispronouncing that, but it's actually a thing. And it is sort of sacred geometry in some capacity carved into these thresholds or spaces to keep out evil spirits. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at this and consider it, but to me, it does make me wonder. The circle of salt, the horseshoe, this type of stuff, the carvings underneath the porch or in the walls. What's the difference between, let's say, in the first space, a natural threshold to keep spirits out or away, and beyond that, a unnatural threshold sort of made by human belief? Whether that's going to be the circle of salt, these carvings, and I got a whole list of stuff we can talk about, of course, but that's where we'll start tonight, because there's a lot to this, like I said. And why do you think this has been a thing for so long? It seems like, and by the way, it's 2 days from Halloween. Is it possible we should be battening down the hatches for evil spirits because the veil is thinning? And if so, what should we be doing right now? Should we be carving things into the walls? I mean, don't tell the landlord. Shh. But maybe, just maybe, there's something to this. And is there some way that we should batten down the hatches spiritually coming in the next 48 hours as we creep into the actual Halloween itself? So that's what's on my mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think this stuff is real? What is it? Why are there so many different ideas with the circle of salt or the witch's pegs or this other apotropaic magic? Can I even say it? No, I can't even say it. I'll just say the other thing. These witches' carvings. What is going on with this? And is it, once again, sort of shoring up the power of belief to create a threshold where a threshold may or may not exist naturally? And that's what's on my mind tonight. Words are very hard indeed, especially, never mind. So the discovery of witches' marks at Tudor-era sites and the historical significance of witch pegs highlight how deeply rooted superstition was in daily life. These apotropaic symbols, I think I said it, carved into the thresholds and hearths, served as barriers against what was perceived as malevolent supernatural forces. The intention was clear: safeguard the home from unseen threats, a practice that reveals how fear of the unknown permeated both private spaces and community rituals. Witch pegs, functioning as both spiritual anchors and psychological tools, reinforced the belief that witchcraft could be contained or redirected. This blend of folklore and protection suggests a society where the boundaries between the mundane and the mystical were fluid, and the supernatural was treated with both caution and practicality. The presence of these symbols offers a glimpse into a time when belief wasn't just a private affair, it was inscribed into the very architecture of existence, which I love where that starts. And so there's a whole list. I've got a whole list of stuff here, and I'll mark that spot so we can get back to it in a moment. But I started with the circle of salt, sort of that idea. Remember, and I've said this in the past too. I've kind of joking, Michael Strange broadcasting from Las Vegas in a circle of salt as, sort of that boundary, the protection, the, keep the spooks out or whatever, whether they're actual FBI spooks or actual specters or ghouls from another realm, right? Maybe it works just the same. But actually an interesting take on that is that in, let's say, the sense of law enforcement or the FBI or, there are supposedly these thresholds that are held in place through, the Constitution. If you guys are familiar with the United States and the Fourth Amendment, the, what is it? The right to a search and seizure laws, so that people just can't come in and take your stuff. The government just can't come in. They have to have a warrant. They have to have probable cause. It has to be signed by a judge. They can't, except for no-knock warrants, which is a whole different thing and probably a whole different show. But the reason I bring that up is because of that threshold magic is sort of held in place by the law itself, by that belief of the Fourth Amendment that we should have this sacred space to us of our belongings, of our papers, as it's said in the Constitution, right? And don't worry, we're not going to go full spin into a Constitution show here, but I think it is an important concept. And when you think about, okay, Mike, that's ridiculous that you carve some things in the wall and put out some witch pegs and it's going to keep some evil spirits away, right? Maybe. I mean, maybe, as usual. Oh, and by the way, that's a perfect time to drop the disclaimers. All the disclaimers apply. I'm not trying to tell you to believe anything. I'm not professing anything. These are just philosophical constructs and trying to amalgamate a bunch of ideas into one space and have a conversation about it. So take what you want, take what you don't want, but hopefully you're going to have a good time, because that's what we always do here. But that's the deal, right? And back to the search and seizure laws. And because of the belief system of the entirety of this country and going back to the founding principles, it almost seems like that's in some capacity like a magical barrier, right? Like a magical barrier of the law itself. And, you know, they say that a cop knocks on the door or something, you open the door, they're not allowed to cross the threshold and come into your house because then they've broken the law. And it is, you know, it's an invisible barrier. It's one of those things. If the door is wide open, anybody, technically, you know, the laws of nature can just stomp right on in, right? I mean, whatever, except, isn't it odd that with like police officers and this type of stuff, or, you know, whatever, government authorities, whatever it is, they're not allowed in unless you invite them in. Right? Isn't that a little strange? A little strange how those kind of parallels fit. And by the way, they're called spooks, you know, not all of them, but, you know, I guess cops aren't directly spooks, but you get the idea, right? The magic concept, the concept of that old magic still applies to modern law, at least here in the States. I know there are places out there that, well, this stuff isn't, you know, this magic does not apply. The old magic ways do not apply because their actual, you know, quote, constitutions or whatever, charters or whatever they have don't really secure you in your papers like they do here in the Constitution. But you get what I mean, right? So think of the cops as evil entities. And I don't mean that. I mean, I like most cops. Most of them are pretty good people, and they're out there sticking their neck out trying to get between danger and normal folks. And as always, there's a lot of bad apples in every aspect of life, so of course there's going to be bad cops as well. But just so we don't turn this into a political crap on cops show, I don't want to do that. But you get the point here. Is that let's call them theoretically the spooks. In this case, it is a metaphor for exactly that. And this threshold magic in that space is like keeping the evil spirits at bay through the threshold of the law. In this case, it is sort of like the law. Yeah, the agents. There you go, Matt's out. And so keeping the agents out, the spooks, the same thing, metaphorically at least, and they cannot come in unless they've been invited, or unless there's some sort of like, I don't know, a deep, dire, magic from before the dawn of time, deep magic from before, where they have to get a warrant, right? A supernatural warrant. And I wonder about that, by the way. So let's think about that metaphorically, and it just came to mind right now. So if you can bypass sort of the law, the threshold of the law itself, and come into somebody's property and, you know, suddenly start messing, searching, stealing, taking all the stuff, right? Whatever it is, you know, the government calls it confiscation of of property. They don't call it stealing because, well, then it would be suspicious. But the government calls it confiscation of property as they conduct an investigation, right? Okay, so just there's my government digs for the night. But you get what I'm saying here. If we have that same similar space and this old idea that's been echoed in this new space, well, maybe there is something to this. And how come, let's say, with the idea of a warrant to kind of come through that, you know, that magic of the law itself, the barrier between the law and the individual, is it possible then to get like a supernatural warrant and for Dracula to just come stomping his way in because he's got something, you know, some kind of business on higher authority, and he doesn't need your permission at all? I don't know, just an idea as I was talking about it. But you see how there's some pretty bizarre parallels here. And if you think about, again, back to the Circle of Salt where we started tonight, and again, the witches' pegs and these carvings in the walls and this, you know, old version of folk magic, which I think is a fantastic thing as usual. That's why there's magic words. What's up, says Mattsaw? Yes, indeed. But there's a lot of ways to look at it. And of course, a lot of things they actually used as part of it. Yeah, this pop is killing me. Circle of Salt. So salt has long been regarded as a purifying substance, because here I am broadcasting from the Circle of Salt. And if you guys have been listening for any amount of time, I joke that it's actually just a ring of Cheetos around the spot I'm standing in here. But it's really not. But it's Circle of Salt, okay? But it's believed to repel evil spirits and negative energy. Drawing a circle of salt creates a barrier, often used in rituals or spells to protect individuals or spaces from supernatural harm. No pop on kick. Thank you, Herschel. Appreciate that. The other one I mentioned is iron. We talked about horseshoes, this type of stuff, right? So iron objects. Folklore holds that iron repels malevolent entities. Horseshoes nailed above doorways, iron keys, or knives placed under pillows are believed to block or confuse spirits, demons, or witches? I wonder if there's something you could put inside the house that would confuse the spooks when they come in to confiscate your items. And there's my other dig. Other stuff, rowan branches and herbs. So rowan trees and specific herbs like a sage or rosemary were thought to possess protective qualities. Placing these at entry points or burning them as incense is believed to cleanse spaces and keep malicious forces at bay. Witch bottles. This is a new one to me. I hadn't heard of this. These were filled with items such as nails, hair, and urine, then sealed and buried under thresholds or fireplaces. The intent was to trap malevolent energy or curse it back upon the sender. Red thread or twine, so binding objects or entrances. We've talked about this one in the past with red thread, has protective significance in several cultures. This symbolic act is often associated with warding off evil spirits or misfortune. Holy water, of course, back to the source waters, but in this case, it's holy water. It's been blessed. So in Christian traditions, sprinkling holy water or placing crosses above doorways provides spiritual protection, creating a barrier against influences, which is an interesting aside. When I was growing up, my grandmother, heavily Catholic, it never dawned on me, but all the crosses above the doors, she had them, the little crosses literally above every single doorway in the house. It never really dawned on me as a kid, but that's what that was. It's a sort of threshold magic of every single threshold within the home. So it's like, kind of double layering the protection against evil spirits, which is incredible to me, or demons, or whatever you want to call them, right? We talked about this in the past as well. Chalk symbols. So similar to witches' marks, symbols drawn in chalk like pentagrams or protective runes can guard against negative forces by marking boundaries or invoking divine protection. And of course, animal skulls and charms. In some folk traditions, placing animal skulls or specific charms near entry points is believed to divert harmful spirits, acting as both a warning and a ward. Now, the question for you guys tonight is, what is the difference between a natural boundary and between something like this, like a man-made boundary, that circle of salt, sort of your actual home and the doorway, all these things we talked about, the holy water, the red thread, the circle of salt. Is there a difference, or is it simply the difference of belief and the belief and intent behind these barriers themselves? And does anybody actually do this stuff? And what can you tell me about it? Because it is fascinating, as I said, because of course there's a lot of ways to consider this, but notice how it is really in parallel with modern law in, at least in the United States. And I'm sure there's going to be parallels. I'm just not as familiar with laws in other countries, but I wonder if there are, closer parallels in other countries between old folklore and the law itself. Yeah, but it's close enough for me when you're talking about thresholds and the spooks can't come in unless you invite them, which, by the way, if you're ever accosted by the police, keep your damn mouth shut. And there you go. And that way you can't invite them in, right? If you just shut your mouth, you can't invite them in. There you go. That's some not legal advice from a knucklehead that's not an attorney, but you get what I'm saying here. So anyway, what do you guys think about this? First off, why are they different, the natural barrier versus something man-made? And is it all about the power of belief anyway? Meaning that natural magic is quite a bit different than witchcraft itself, or is it the same thing and it's just our intent and our knowledge and recognition of it? And that's where my mind is tonight. I don't really know, but it does seem like, as I'm calling this, thresholds of power and the intersection of belief, law, and magic might have a little bit more in common than we ever dreamed. And there you go.